Welcome in, football fans. It is Dan Hardenbrook. Glad to have you along with M123 FM and the EUP Sports Network. Opening week is finally here. After months of waiting, weeks of practice, the countdown is down to just days before we start the 2023 high school football season. And this is your EUP football preview show. Glad to have you along. Hope everybody getting ready for the start of the season. Get out that gear. Get ready to sport your favorite school colors. Cheer on your favorite local team as they make their way through the 2023 season. Should be another great year for the Great Lakes 8 East as the core group of perennial powerhouses look to keep their success rolling, and that lower level of teams looks to break through and join that upper echelon. We've also got one former familiar foe for many making the jump down from 11-man joining the 8-man ranks. We've been talking about our friends in 11-man from Manistee, who we'll see in select games throughout the season here on M123 FM and the EUP Sports Network. We are going to be all over the region all season long as your number one go-to source for local high school football action. We'll be checking in with coaches, players, keep you up to date each and every week on the key matchups, any big schedule changes, and where teams stand as we make our way through this 2023 season. One big question for every team that I have. I'll also give you what I think may be the answer to that key as well here on the preview show. Here's what we're going to do. We'll break down the week one matchups. We'll talk about those teams, what we can possibly expect this season. Everything gets underway Thursday night in Pickford, where the Panthers will try to bounce back after a rare down season. You know, their performance a year ago will be great for many schools, but Pickford has a championship pedigree, and with that, expectations for greatness. Anything short of that for Josh Rader and company is deemed a failure. How will Pickford bounce back, replacing another talented and productive senior class that have been able to reload countless times in the past? Can they do that again? And we'll step into some of those key roles this season. The Panthers will open up Thursday night in the first game for teams around the EUP when they welcome in Gaylord St. Mary's. You're going to want to follow the Snowbirds from down south below the bridge because they are the non-conference fill-in team for many of the schools in the Great Lakes 8. They'll play several teams this year from around the Eastern UP, and they are a very strong playoff returner from Division I. Last year, Coach Kevin McConnell's group down at Gaylord St. Mary's does a great job, and that just makes the schedule that much tougher when teams survive the league and then go outside. The Panthers, of course, asked if you could reload. The one thing that helps is stability on the sidelines. Nobody's had a longer tenured coach in the Eastern UP than Rader and his team, who've been perennial powerhouses at the 8-man level. Expect big things from Pickford. They're going to be in that mix at the top of the league, where I expect to see Pickford, Newberry, Rudyard, and Munising all jockeying for position in the top half of that Great Lakes 8 East. That is now the only game scheduled for Thursday night. That's because Cedarville Detour, Superior Central, have moved their contest to Friday. It's a full slate on the first Friday night under the lights for the season this coming Friday night. Cedarville Detour will hit the road to Superior Central. What is the status of the program, both in the short term for Coach Scott Barr and company, and the long term, the partnership between Cedarville and Detour? It's year 3, a pivotal and crucial year in the Islanders athletic program. They've restabilized both their youth and JV levels. Also, a big shakeup in the schedule. Cedarville Detour leading a charge of several smaller schools in the Eastern UP and around the region that decided to pull out of conferences to avoid playing certain schools. They'll say it's for safeties and numbers matchups as they try to find more competitive options for their programs with a large gap in enrollment between the top and the bottom teams. However, Cedarville Detour not avoiding all of the big schools. They'll still play the likes of Brimley and others, but not playing a traditional Great Lakes 8 East schedule. They'll be an independent this year. No Newberry, no Pickford, no Munising, no Rudyard. Those 4 teams at the top will not be playing schools like Cedarville Detour and Engadine this year. What are the numbers like? They've been dwindling the past few years, but a strong group of incoming athletes from the lower levels at both Cedarville and Detour. Their basketball program had 42 kids out. How many of those guys are putting on the pads and coming out this season for the fall year? And can Cedarville make that return to glory after a rare playoff miss last season? The Islanders open up at Superior Central. They will take on the Cougars in a Friday contest, and going to be interesting. Cedarville Detour is always that wild card that could be that team that makes the jump up and joins that upper echelon and forms a really strong Great Lakes 8 East. Other Friday night games, how about this one? It's one of the games of the year, and it kicks off in week number 1, an all orange and black battle between what I think will be the two top teams in the conference this year. I'm talking Munising, I'm talking Rudyard. With all due respect to Pickford and Newberry, I think they're a step below where these two teams are at least on paper, coming into the season. The Mustangs won the regional championship. They made a great run all the way up to the state semifinals. Kane Nebel, the heart and soul, gone for the Mustangs. So is the powerhouse twins and the Paramakis. You'd think it's a rebuilding year, but Matt Matson, he doesn't believe in such a thing. Young talent from their freshman and sophomore classes got a taste of that success. And the big question for Munising this year is, can they duplicate their recent run of success? They got 2 big games right off the bat. And the question is, if the Mustangs can survive this early season stretch, will they be the early front runners for the conference crown? They will be home at Mustang Stadium, one of the toughest places to play as they take on the Rudyard Bulldogs. I don't think another team makes a bigger jump than the Bulldogs this year. Of course, they just missed out on the playoffs last year. One of the last teams left out. They were 17 in playoff points in the 16-team field. Coach Jimmy Suggett, and what could be his final ride in Rudyard, is looking to get back on top after it was the Bulldogs who won the regional championship game 2 seasons ago. Of course, they graduated a ton of talent. Last year was their rebuild. They still got a couple of very talented players. Cam Peterson may be the front runner early on for Conference Player of the Year. If it's not him, maybe it's Aiden Bickle. Both looked great in their preseason scrimmages in Newberry last week. The Rudyard faithful has high hopes that Peterson and Bickle, after spending several seasons already playing varsity sports, winning championships in basketball and baseball, they're used to winning. And those two will look to be the leaders for Coach Jimmy Suggett's team. Keep an eye on Eli Sprague. He's kind of been in the shadows of more familiar names and star players. He could have a breakout season this year for the Bulldogs. Rudyard, can they make that big jump and get back into conference championship contention? That is their question. And can anyone slow down that 1-2 attack of Peterson and Bickle? The one great thing you got to love about Rudyard and Munising, and the two things that make their program so successful, and the reason I think that they've got the slight edge early on in the conference this year, is the culture that they have created. In Rudyard, they're in the weight room at 7 a.m. every day. Not because they have to be, not because it's a requirement for the program, but these guys love to work. You talk to some of their other coaches, some of the other administrators, some of the fans. The entire community is invested in this program. And it's more than just a game when you step on the field for a program like Rudyard or Munising. And the Bulldogs, well, they buy in because their players want to. They have that expectation. They have that tradition. Now they look to get back to being the Bulldogs that we've all come to expect. And Rudyard, I think, can be poised for a very strong season. Other coaches, when I talk to them around the league as we get ready for week number 1, have said, look out for Rudyard. Don't discount them based on last year's record. Another tough schedule. Bulldogs looking to bounce back this year. Meanwhile, Munising, is it too much to replace this time for Coach Matt Matson? We all know about the talent. We all know about the young, great athletes. They won a state championship in basketball. Great success last year in football. But man, you are replacing a guy who put a team completely on his shoulders in the regional round, carried the ball 67 times in the 14-0 win over Newberry last year in a mud pit at Mustang Stadium. Kane Niebel was the heart and soul of Munising athletics. That is easy to replace talent-wise, but not always easy to replace in that leadership and that character department. And Niebel last year was one of the best all-around players. He could have been an all-UP Dream Team selection on both sides of the ball. He had all-state caliber numbers, offensively and defensively. That is a ton of production that the Mustangs have to replace. But Matt Matson probably hates losing just about more than anything else. He's a guy that feels the sun will not rise the next day if things do not go the Mustangs' way. You know they're going to be hungry. They are going to be motivated. And again, we're talking guys stepping out of the shadows from being role players, not seeing a lot of time, to finally getting their chance to shine. The Mustangs play a tougher style of football than anybody else. They're kind of the odd wild card in 8-man football where everybody's spreading it out, slinging the rock around, big yards, big points. They just come out and punch you in the mouth, and that is going to be a fantastic game Friday night in week 1 for the Mustangs and the Bulldogs. You are not going to want to miss that one. Friday night also sees two Great Lakes 8 East foes face off. It's the third straight year that the Brimley Bays will open up battling the Newberry Indians. Newberry hosting their second annual high school football Patriot game, pays tribute to local veterans in the Lewis County area. That event hosted in partnership with the Lewis County Veteran Services Office. That'll be our feature game Friday night live on E.U.P Sports Network and M123 FM. Brimley fans, you can also catch your radio play-by-play broadcast courtesy of the crew at Eagle 95.1 in Sault Ste. Marie. All eyes going to see if Brimley can take that next jump up. They canceled some games the past couple of years due to short numbers. Last year, in the JV game against Newberry, the Bays didn't even make it to halftime, saved everybody, brought them up to fill in the varsity contest, and it still was an ugly finish for Brimley. But they did win a couple of games last year. They turned their lengthy losing streak around. Stability helps over there. Bob Cameron back running that program. He's come up with this group through the youth level. He's had a year to install a system. He's had a year where he's bringing back a lot of their top talent. But this is a tough matchup for Newberry. Back-to-back trips to the regional round. While we ask if the Bays can make the next step up, similar question for Newberry. Can they finally get over the hump and win that regional round? This is a team that in their transition to 8-man fell short of the playoffs, then got in, took a couple of years to win a first-round game. Now they've done that a couple of years. They just can't get over that second-round level. Bays and Indians, last year, it was 58-0 Newberry winning that contest. 2 years ago, 36-0. That's a combined 94-0 margin for the Indians in the last two seasons. You know Brimley has this thing circled right off the bat. You know that they're not just trying to compete, but play for a little bit of respect as well. They had success against this Newberry group earlier on in their careers at the JV level. Good to see how each team developed. For Newberry, a ton of returning talent on the offensive side of the ball. All UP wide receiver Matthew Rahali, who racked up touchdowns 6 different ways last season. Kennedy Depew averaged over 30 yards per catch. One of the best big play receivers in the game. Gavin Nutkins, the starting quarterback, also back. Defensively, you're led by the all-UP defensive end, Gabe Luck. But here's something that Newberry's done. They're shaking things up this offseason because they don't just want to be satisfied with being good. They want to be great. Maybe the final ride for Joe Austin, the Hall of Fame head coach, is looking to lead Newberry to that regional championship. A lot of different pieces moving around. Austin's taken back over the play calling. He's putting in a more old-school, physical style of offense while also mixing in the spread. My question for the Indians is, are they going to try to do too much too early? You got your quarterback back from last year, your 2 top wide receivers from last year, but all of those guys are going to be playing different positions at times. Looks like the Indians are going to rotate quarterbacks early in the season to get the best matchup they possibly can. So when Nutkins isn't the quarterback, he's going to be playing some tight end. When Matthew Rahaly isn't split out wide, he's going to be the quarterback and not use that Swiss Army knife. Depew, we mentioned 30 yards per catch. Him and Brian Nelson going to split the ball carrying duties as running backs this year to replace 1,300-yard rusher Marco Juarez. Mentioned Gabe Luck on the defensive side. All E.U.P Dream Team as a defensive end last year. Well, with some of the other holes from guys that Newberry lost, Luck's moving from a spot where he was one of the very best in the U.P to linebacker where he's never really played before. So the Indians, despite their success, aren't taking anything for granted. They're trying to put the pieces together to make this year's team the best it could possibly be. Keep an eye on the big fella, Ethan Pavey, a standout on the offensive line. He'll also get more reps on defense this year. Improvement from some young guys who got a taste of varsity experience, like a Jude Taylor. Mentioned to Brian Nelson. You also have to keep an eye on the Indians with what they do at center, because the last time they played a hybrid offense that was a mix of power and spread, they had multiple centers, different guys snapping. Coach Joe Austin is putting all of the options on the table for the Indians this season. They will hope to get to win number 1 when they take on the Brimley Bays. Friday night, 7 o'clock, the kickoff in that contest. One game left in the Eastern End teams as they carry over to Saturday. Will be the Engadine Eagles taking on Rapid River. Rebuild in Rapid River. They lose Carter Johnson. Big question for the Eagles is in the second year under Coach Charlie Fosdick, can they take the next step? Won 2 games last year, snapped one of the state's longest active losing streaks. The question now is, with the experience the players have in the system, with Fosdick coming back for year 2, with them playing what they say is a more competitive schedule, they're not going to play those powerhouses like Newberry and Rudyard, Pickford and Munising. Instead, picking up some smaller teams like Mid-Penn. They'll play Rapid River and Superior Central. They'll play a couple of other small Division II 8-man schools from the Lower Peninsula as well. I was at Engadine practice a couple of times here in the preseason. There's a real stress on fundamentals and a focus on the little things, stuff that you don't see a lot of other schools working on when you go to their preseason practices and scrimmages. Engadine's looking to try and catch teams off guard by doing the little things right, and hopefully those extra things very, very well, and take that next step. Going to be interesting to see, with a lot of 3- and 4-year starters on the varsity for Engadine this year who did not have JV football the past few seasons. Can that experience translate into wins for the Eagles? One new team in the 8-man ranks is St. Ignace. Let's talk a little bit about the Saints, a talented group of athletes. Their middle school program started it on the JVs, made the transition last year. Now the Saints varsity comes down. They'll be an independent for this year, with admission into the Great Lakes 8 East coming possibly in 2024. St. Ignace will play many of the teams on the Great Lakes 8 East schedule to get those rivalries and those future dates secured. But they'll also play tough teams like Sutton's Bay in week number 1. What a debut for the Saints Friday night. They'll take on one of the best teams in recent seasons, as Sutton's Bay will take on the Saints. That's a 6 o'clock kickoff on Friday night. And the question for the Saints is, how do they make that transition dropping down? It's been all about timing for teams. Pickford timed it perfectly. When they came down, they went right into being a powerhouse in 8-man football. Some teams, like we said, Newberry, took them a couple of years to get the transition, to get the personnel right, to figure out their system. What side of that coin will the Saints be on? Should be a fantastic, great week number 1 with a huge season of big games, and we will be all over the map all season long. Make sure you follow us. You can check out EUP Sports Network M123 FM for our broadcast games. We'll also feature contests from our partners with the Rudyard Bulldog Bulletin. The boys are back calling games on their Facebook page this year. And of course, Brimley fans, you can again catch the Bays on Eagle 95.1 all season long. Some of the other big games that we want you to mark on your calendar. Week 2, it's a Thursday night matchup next week, August 31st. The Mustangs in Munising will travel to Newberry for the rematch in the battle for the Axe. Newberry says this is the year they are taking it back. Mustangs, the only 2 wins over Newberry last year. That's going to be a great game in week number 2. Week 3, Newberry and Rudyard, all these top teams playing each other early on. Less room for error. Who gets that early season matchup? Coming up a little bit later on in the season, we'll see Rudyard at Pickford in week number 4. What should be a fantastic matchup there. Munising at Pickford in week number 6. How about Pickford traveling to Newberry? You remember 2 years ago, the last time they did that was an overtime classic in the rain. The Panthers won before Newberry got revenge in the playoffs. And then the Indians and the Saints, the old Straits Area Conference rivalry, comes to 8-man football week number 9. We'll talk about those games more as we get closer to them on the calendar. Got to give you my picks for the season. I'm going to go ahead and stay with the best. To be the best, you got to beat the best. And until I see Munising lay an egg, I'm going to go with the Mustangs to win the Great Lakes 8 East again this year. Rudyard will be my preseason number 2 pick, followed by Newberry and then Pickford in the top 4. Who jumps up to join that next group in the group of 5? Going to go with the wild card there with Cedarville Detour. Scott Barr has a plan. He has been under a ton of criticism. That co-op almost dissolved. If they can get rid of all the distractions, look for Cedarville Detour and an honorable mention to Brimley and Engadine to make those jumps up. Although Engadine and Cedarville aren't in the conference, I think they'll be the next in line in the Eastern UP if we're to get 5 teams into the playoffs. And Saints fans, you're going to love what your offense can do at the 8-man football level if they can put those pieces together. Going to be a great season. Stay safe as you travel around following your favorite team. And as always, make sure you follow us each and every week. We'll preview what's ahead, recap the games from the week before, give you our top player performances, and so much more. Football season is finally here. Enough talk. Let's lace them up, flip on the lights, and kick off the 2023 season this week with the EUP Sports Network and M123 FM.